over the last couple of days, there has been this huge saga unfold between PEA, the Professional Esports Association, and whether or not the players of the PEA teams will compete next season in ESL Pro League, the North American division. Now, to explain this, we have to go into an overview of a lot of what these things are so that we can get into the nitty-gritty of the actual facts. So PEA, the Professional Esports Association, was formed in September with 7 teams. It was TSM, Cloud9, Team Liquid, Counterlogic Gaming, Immortals, NRG, and Complexity. And the plan was not just to be an association as they presented it. I mean, it was a similar scenario to what happened with WESA in Europe, where they're obviously going to be involved with ESL directly and how their league runs. So the plan was to create their own league. And their own league would start in 2017, and it would span 10 weeks and have a prize pool at the time it was announced of $1 million total. There would be players, owners receiving 50% of the profits split among them, and casters would receive an equal share to the players. That's the way it was built. Now, the overview of all the drama that's gone on, and there's so much stuff happened that you can't just contain it in one video. The video would have to be so long, and I feel like it would actually water down some of the better points. And since so much has been said about us, so much discussed, in general, I want to address perspectives I don't really see having been outlined very well or haven't been summarized or expressed concisely in the way that I would. So the overview is, the players came forth and published a letter via SirScoots, legendary esports community figure, and the players represented Cloud9, TSM, Immortals, CLG, and Team Liquid. So 5 of the 7 PEA teams, essentially just missing NRG and Complexity. Now, the letter itself was very well sourced. When they would make the points about what PEA had said and what PEA was supposed to be about, they were able to source them directly to statements by PEA. So, for example, there was the point about the PEA saying they weren't pushing for exclusivity and that they were letting players have an authoritative voice. There was the component that players and owners were supposed to be aligned within this league, as it was cited was the case in professional sports leagues. They said as a result that there would be agreement over where they competed. It was promised that there would be the highest level of transparency in the industry. Obviously, a pretty good jab at ESL and WESA. PEA told the players that they wouldn't have to compete in PEA if they didn't want to. It emerged that the voting board within PEA was skewed towards the owners and PEA, where essentially if the owners and PEA voted against what the players wanted, then they won, and the players would automatically lose. The EPL conflict came up, and so the players got SirScoots, and ultimately the players, in some sense, wanted to remain in EPL. Now, whether they want to play in PA was a different matter. They essentially wanted the choice to remain in EPL, and it was intimated they wanted to then exercise that choice and play in EPL. Now, the issue with all of this is the players came forwards and addressed this to the teams. This is all within Scoots' desire still, and were essentially told by the org that it's in their contracts that the organization decides where they competed, and they approached Jason Katz, PEA's commissioner, with all of this, asking what was happening with a lot of those things, and they were told, quote, things change, which they've taken to mean like, oh, if we said you were having a voice in it, you could have a say in it before, well, things have changed now, so that's not the case. Now, after this, Cloud9's owner, Jack Etienne, made a Reddit comment on the Cloud9 subreddit in which he basically said that Scoots, the person who wrote the letter and who's representing all the players, is someone who has always gone out of his way to make things look bad, to make teams look bad, rather. Sean Gares came out, this is shortly after as well, saying that he had in fact been fired due to this letter. There then was a back and forth between Sean Gares and Reginald, the owner of Team Solomon, TSM, the team that Sean Gares plays for, over whether that's in fact true, whether that's why he was fired, what was said between the two of them. We had logs come out, Skype logs. We then had TSM Reginald going ahead and saying that players had actually denied that they wanted to be represented by Sean Gares in here, and that the other players didn't stand behind him. He showed DM logs, etc. He showed Skype logs. He said that he'd had calls with some of them. DK came forwards, and in similar vein to what Reginald just did, DK came forwards, the reporter for CSGO, and said that owners were trying to get those players. Let me think, how many would it have been? How many teams were there? I think it was 5 teams, so 25. They were trying to get among the 25 players as many of them as possible to say that they hadn't read the letter, deny that they approved of it, that they were just somehow bundled up or they were manipulated. The owners were trying to do that. That's what DK reported behind the scenes. Then we had Noah Winston, who is the CEO or something of Immortals come forwards and write his response to the players' letter, which was actually kind of a much more concise and more reasonable version of the things that Reginald, etc., said, where what he outlined was PEA is not an exclusive league. He said that it's the case that it's not possible to compete in all the online leagues, so ECS, EPL, and PEA. There's not room for that. He said PEA proposed a solution to this situation with WESA. He reiterated that the teams have the rights over the players to choose where they play. He said that PEA offers more money, it offers health insurance, it offers financial planning assistance outside of esports. And then he also explained how it would offer more money, and then explained that more money was going to be added on top once WESA had declined the offer to make PEA essentially EPL North America, and outlined exactly the amount per team that they would make. In fact, he said the figure was that the PEA league pays out a guaranteed minimum average of $81,250 per PEA team. Remember, you can compete in the league. There's going to be a 10-team league without being a PEA team. There are 7 PEA teams because obviously they would want people like SK, Optic, etc. to compete even though they're not in PEA. And he said that this is prize money plus minimum guaranteed profit share. Profit share is obviously the PEA teams, compared to a guaranteed minimum average of $21,000 per NA team in ESL Pro League. And it said, and a maximum average of $49,857 per team if NA teams took all the top 6 spots at the NA EU EPL LAN final, which obviously is absolutely not a given in any sense. And he then reiterated that the decision, well, he actually stated out right now that they would change it, and now the decision as to whether compete in EPL would be given to the players. They would choose which leagues to compete in, even though you just pointed out that they didn't have to do that necessarily. Now, the actual plan put forwards, we were told, for PEA and WESA, which is EPL essentially, that's the European version of PEA, you can consider it as, to coexist, was PEA proposed a plan where EPL would essentially leave NA because PEA would be the EPL NA. Now, they wouldn't, in the crucial sense that they wouldn't be called EPL NA, so it wouldn't be helping ESL, wouldn't be helping ESL sponsors or ESL's brand, but EPL would run their, PEA would run their league in North America with no EPL NA happening, and then they'd provide the prize money for that, obviously, because it's their league, and then there would be a joint global finals, like we have the Pro League finals at the moment, but with European, so EPL, which would only be in Europe at that point, EPL European teams making it there. We had 6 last time, 6 again, presumably. And then we'd have PEA, and the top 6 from that would go to the global finals. And then there'd be a shared global final in that particular sense. And it said that Jason Katz essentially said that if this didn't happen, then PEA would just pull their teams from EPL anyway, and then PEA would have their own league, and there'd be no EPL NA except for teams outside of PEA. So the other teams like SK and Optic, etc. And thus the players, based on hearing this, were under the impression that the PEA and their owners, which make up the PEA largely, by the way, intended therefore to prevent their teams from playing in EPL since the negotiations are broken down with EPL and WESA. Now, the reason why this first video part is just PEA versus WESA is because this is such a long topic, and I actually feel like it should be broken up into chunks so that people can get the part that they want to see. So the reason why the first topic is PEA versus WESA is because ultimately that is what the battle here is going on. It is PEA versus WESA, and then it is the leagues which they represent and own, which will then be the battleground of what is going on with this overall war. But you have to understand that the players are just the mechanism by which WESA and PEA are battling each other right now, and they're the aspect which, in terms of the public, is very important, even though it's actually the league that is the bigger issue. So it's really all about, do the PEA teams compete in EPL North America next season? And that is the real game. The game is between WESA, which you can consider EPL, and PEA. So let's think first of all about PEA. So the problem with PEA is the public perception is that they want their own league and they want it to be exclusive, and that they want their league to kind of be their NALCS. And LCS is obviously the League Championship Series, which is the league that teams compete in regionally in North America in League of Legends. And the reason why this is significant is when you look at the ownership base of PEA, it's made up of mostly the teams that were in North American LCS last year. And those teams earlier in 2016 had their own public battle with Riot Games over the fact that they wanted more help in terms of revenue sharing in LCS. They wanted franchising in LCS. They'll obviously be franchising in PEA so that they would have guaranteed spots in any LCS so they could build they claimed so they could build the revenue and sponsorship themselves as well. They wanted all these things. which currently, or at least at the time, LCS did not offer. Therefore, the perception when they come into CSGO, these same owners, is that they want to essentially have an NALCS, but they'll be the ones in charge of it, and they'll set all these terms, and they'll decide how it runs in that sense, and therefore they'll share the profit as well, which is a key aspect. Because obviously at the moment, well, at the time that was drafted, Riot doesn't share the profit. Riot, they weren't making much money because they fucked up, and it's Riot, but if Riot had deals like the MLBAM deal that's coming now, it's going to be like 300 million for a few years of NALCS, then yes, in this world, that's the money that the owners want to have a share of. So they would be in control. They would be able to get that money and share it to themselves and their players. Whereas in the LCS scenario, they're like players. They just play within it and they get the prize money. That's it. So the other perception of PEA in this sense is that they want to take over North America and they want to be the ones in charge of it. And people think that they want to be exclusive. Now, if you look at the way they operate, they haven't attempted exclusivity. That's worth pointing out. Like, they haven't said they will pull out of ECS. That's a key point to make when people make out like they're trying to be a monopoly, they're trying to be exclusive. They have never said they were going to pull out of ECS. Now, the reason this is significant to me is that they're using soft exclusivity. Now, what I call soft exclusivity, what I mean by that, is they're not actually saying you can't compete in this other league, but what they're saying is we're going to put our league right by that league, so they'll be side by side, and the dates will overlap, and it won't be possible to play in both. Therefore, it's a soft exclusivity in as much as you have to choose between these two options. Now, it's definitely not exclusivity, because it's not that you can't compete in any other competitions or even other leagues, because you can compete in ECS. That's worth pointing out, and that's actually a question that I haven't seen people asking, which is so bizarre to me. If you're going to talk about how this is PEA enforcing exclusivity and that's their whole mindset, then why not go ahead and just take the ECS spots as well and say, you know what, ECS, you can fuck off as well, or you can do a deal with us and we'll be the NA version of ECS as well and our teams go to that final. Why have they not done that? Why is it ECS allowed to exist by PEA's owners, and why is that the soft exclusivity not going parallel with that? I mean, you could say it's because the schedule already makes it so EPL and ECS can coexist, but why have they chosen that one to do battle with rather than EPL? Now, as far as I know, it's because ECS gives more to teams. ECS has already themselves talked about how they've got some sort of a revenue share, or they give some, or they presumably pay money. I mean, they're backed by Twitch originally. They pay money to the teams in some way that EPL doesn't at the moment. So that's something I want people to consider already. There already is some sort of an acknowledgement that ECS is allowed to exist within the PEA universe as well as PEA existing, and they're not forcing a conflict as far as we can tell between them and ECS. Maybe down the line that's the plan. We don't know, but right now there's no reason to assume that. Now, the problem I have with all this, the notion that they want to control NA, they want to have their own league, is actually the public perception of it, that this is automatically a bad thing. It's negative for the game, and we have to fight it tooth and nail. And this is like the freedom fight. As long as we're all against PEA, we're all battling in favor of things, and EPL, they're great, aren't they? And they should exist, and we should all definitely all play in EPL. Now, why is it a bad thing that PEA wants to take over from EPL NA? Why is it a bad thing that they want to replace and oust the EPL from NA, essentially? I mean, as EPA themselves say, there isn't enough room for more leagues. I mean, 2 leagues is already stretching it. It's already running a lot of players thin. I see players complaining all the time about having to play EPL or ECS matches right after they get home from events. We can't fit in a 3rd league. That absolutely is a fact that I haven't seen anyone able to dispute. You just simply do not have time for 3 leagues, and especially with the scheduling. So at the moment, there are 2 main leagues. There is EPL and ECS, and if you're in those leagues, those are the ones you compete in. If you're not, maybe you can compete in some other online leagues or smaller leagues, but those are the main 2 that everyone wants to be at the moment. And even with those 2, we're stretching at the moment. So here's the question. If the PEA actually is better in terms of how it's set out than EPL, then what would the issue be? I notice people don't think of that. They just automatically think because the players are against it, right? This must be bad and EPL must be great and I love EPL. Like, what? Why is it necessarily bad if they're offering a better league and a better deal than ESL in that particular sense? EPL. That's one thing that I find kind of bizarre about the way this whole argument is being framed by people at the moment. I mean, what are the alternatives that the players suggest to EPL, ECS, and PEA trying to exist and only 2 being able to exist? What is their solution? Is their solution at the moment that there should be no PEA? PEA should not exist at all. Now, that's not really what the players have outlined. Yet the players say we want to also choose to compete in EPL if we want to, and PEA can exist because it's our owners as well. And they haven't mentioned ECS either. Should ECS be allowed to exist? Why are the players not saying, hey, we love EPL, but you know what? We also love ECS because it's our owners who are going to get rev share. So why don't we just have EPL and PEA, and they can not overlap with each other, but let's just get rid of the ECS, that one that's not bad. See, the players themselves, I feel like, are being a bit disingenuous by making out like they won't say in this. Like, that's the thing. They're politically trying to get a say in it. They're trying to play their own bosses using the public, but they're not themselves presenting an alternative that, if they really were for the overall global scene, why haven't they presented an alternative as to how all three could coexist, or which of the two should be picked, and then the reasons why. What are the reasons why they should all be allowed to exist, or why you would choose to compete in one, or why, this is something that hasn't really been outlined very well, I noticed, so far. So is the player's plan simply not to play in PEA rather, and just to imagine that ECS and EPL are all that exist and basically just go back in time and PEA is just an association, doesn't exist? Is that the plan? I mean, why would that be the case? Why would they want that? Do they not want the revenue from PEA? I mean, it was intimated in the letters and then the responses and the back and forth between Scoots and Noah Winston that part of the problem is that they didn't really have it explained to them properly how much revenue there would be or how it would be earned or if there would be. So some of them felt like maybe they're being conned and their owners are going to own this PEA, but it'll be, sorry, there wasn't any profit, so I guess your percentage is whatever your percent of nothing is. That sounds like what they were worried about. So I'll say on that sense, sounds like PEA did a bad job selling on that and explaining it to them. So do they not feel as though the profit's legit? Now, that's a decent aspect to bring up, but that's not something that they've really properly outlined. Now, they did say that they contacted PEA and they've tried to get like specifics and facts and details. So again, is this a power play to get those facts and details, then to be able to negotiate from this? Because that's the problem. It's being presented as it's all just about the player's right to choose. But then these issues seem more pertinent to me, and these are ones that have been addressed within it. So it's not just the player's right to choose. Then you've got to ask, in a world where they would want all three leagues to somehow exist, how can you have three, let's say they're all 10-week, like 3 10-week leagues and then lands in between and majors? It can't be done, right? So when people also, this is the public response to all of this, the public came out, I don't know why I'm saying that's not like the one group. The public, I've seen people repeatedly making this issue and mega upvoted on Reddit, which is saying like, well, since there is oversaturation and there already are too many leagues, which PEA itself addresses and says is the case, then why would you add another league? Like, are people actually being that obtuse or legitimately stupid? I mean, think about this. They wanted a new league because they want a league that is better than EPL in terms of prize money, who owns it, who has a say in it, what the revenue sharing of the league is, what the future of the league is when you get broadcast rights and who gets to share in that and who gets to have control over it. Why is it a surprise that PEA themselves will want to have a say in all that and be the ones who run the league when essentially, as they're saying right now, at the moment, they don't need EPL. Now, sure, they won't have SK and Optic. That's a problem in terms of quality of the league. And you won't have the global finals if WESA doesn't agree to your terms, which obviously are very hardline terms at the moment. But the premise isn't a ridiculous one. I don't know why you would say that's a ridiculous premise for PEA themselves. That seems actually quite a reasonable premise in that particular sense. Going on, if we look at least at what they claim, assuming what they claim in terms of how much they've raised and how they're structuring the league, actually it seems as if PEA's done a better job in organising a North American Counter-Strike league than EPL has. In fact, I haven't seen anyone so far who's been able to match the kind of numbers and kind of the setup that they claim to have for PEA North American Season 1. I mean, just look at it. In terms of the league part, in terms of the revenue sharing, that's because PEA is made up of a bunch of people who are very good businessmen in esports. And NA has always been the gold mine in terms of sponsors, in terms of backing. So you've got to ask this. If EPL's running this league, but they're all Europeans and they've got their whole WESA thing going on, they're catering to the European teams in WESA, why hasn't EPL been able to go into the North American market and for their North American league being able to raise this kind of money? Why is the money for EPL NA identical to the money for EPL EU? That doesn't even make sense. I mean, it's a different league in a different region at different times, with a different viewer base and a different potential access to sponsors because it's a regional league, right? Why is EPL not being able to raise that kind of money for EPL NA? Why have they not been able to solve the issue in that sense by saying, right, well, look, since it's the same money from us, just pick between we've got the stability and the history and us guys. That would be a very easy way to argue against it. Whereas at the moment, it's not even about whether EPL's better. It's about the fact that players haven't had the choice or feel like they haven't had the full information and therefore are worried they're getting tricked over PEA. I mean, think about this. We saw that when Noah Winston's piece, his reply, that the original offer to WESA was that when PEA ran as the NA league, they would offer $500,000 prize money in comparison to EPL. I mean, I think this is going off last season's numbers, having $159,000 prize money. So more than 3 times more prize money. Then, when WESA declined, the guys from PEA were going to bump the prize money up to $750,000. So a massive amount more. Why was ESL not able to do that? And why is that not a factor? I mean, sure, it certainly seems that the players didn't necessarily know these numbers, these metrics, how they're breaking down, and then what would then translate to profit. That's certainly a key aspect to ask about. But in terms of prize money, it's way better. And you have to ask why EPL hasn't been able to do that. Now, it's getting a bit warm in here, isn't it? Oh, yeah, just gotta feel a bit more comfy now. So, on the WESA/EPL side of things, think about it from the WESA/EPL side of things, because this makes sense as well. PEA wants to take over part of their business. PEA is going to bring more money in, but that doesn't help ESL. That doesn't help ESL's sponsors. ESL NA existing is a much better option for them. PEA is bringing in more money only for the NA division, and that immediately, if I saw that breakdown that Noah Winston showed, and I was an EU team, and I was like, we're better than they are at Counter-Strike. Wait a minute, wait, WESA, you are fucked up, mate. How have you gotten us a third of the prize money they've got? What's going on here? So I have to win the European division way harder, way more competitive. That's why we've seen VP and Navi don't qualify for those lands. And meanwhile, some team, NRG or whatever, who slip into 6th place, they're going to get more money than I am. And they're going to come 6th, and I'm going to come 1st over here. That would be a problem right in itself right there. That would also be an issue with ESL balancing it out. Then you've got to consider PEA doesn't have the better teams right now. So EPL can absolutely call their bluff and say, oh, go ahead, make your own league. Oh, play without all the best teams. Give me all the best teams. I'll make my own league. And hey, you know what? Maybe I'll just have an EPL NA with SK and Optic, the two best NA region teams at the moment. And you can have all the other ones. And we'll see who actually wins out of this league. And we'll see if I can make the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th best team, well, the 3rd, 4th, 5th best teams in my region good enough in that sense. Or maybe some EU teams might move over just to compete in my EPL NA. Who knows what happens with that? That's why they're willing to call their bluff and keep them at the bargaining table. Plus, it's not that EPL's like, oh, it's EPL or nothing, and PEA is like it's PEA or nothing. They are communicating, but this is where the guys from WESA and ESL have done their power move, because they want it all. They want to still have their whole league with all the teams in. Therefore, what they've done is go to the players and tell them, hey, your owners are going to lock you out, and it's pretty much over, and it's the apocalypse, and the sky's falling, and yeah, just grab everything now because it's over for you guys. See ya, bye, I'm just sailing around the ESL ship. And then the players are like, oh, what the fuck, Scoots, help us. That's the urgency comes, as far as we can tell, from the WESA side of things, talking to the players and telling them it's over, basically, and the discussion's ended. Now, if PEA fails, WESA might even get everything back again. They might get all the teams back again. They might be able to go ahead. And this is all without spending any more money. They don't have to bump the prize pool up 3 times more or 5 times more or whatever it might be in that particular sense. They don't have to do any of that, and they can keep their current operation. Now, here's the problem. When you put WESA versus PEA, so the offer to have EPL NA essentially disappear and PEA occupy that spot but be their own league and not in any way represent ESL and their brands, and then go to a global final, that is not the same as exclusivity. Let's just make that point to begin with, outright. I mean, they're not saying they'll take over ECS, etc. Also, it's not a ridiculous offer. Think about this. If PEA actually had the players on their side, as they thought they did, then it's actually ESL who has to then decide. They, in theory, are the ones with the pressure on them. If PEA has its own players, which it turned out it didn't, that was the power play from ESL. But if PEA had its own players behind them, rank and file, and they'd been able to say, look, we've got all these 25 players that you need in this league, and we're not going to compete, and we're going to make our own league, so you must agree to our terms, or negotiate with us further, then ESL's choice is either make an EPL NA that is only SK and Optic and other teams that are lesser, or somehow integrate with the PEA teams and somehow work on some sort of a deal going forwards. It's not that ESL ever had the choice, in theory, to have it as business as usual. Now, this is where, if ESL really did this at WESA, they've pulled a great power play, which is by getting the players on their side somehow, by spinning it so it's all about player choice and player rights. Yeah, this is a really big issue, because now maybe ESL can get it to be business as usual, where they get to have their league for way less prize money, with way less player involvement than PEA has, by the way, and way less choice for the players. They can have all the things in their league without spending another dime, because instead of doing it all on the negotiating table, they've gone behind the scenes. They've pulled the Peter Baelish, and they've been in the players' ears. Oh, you better watch out. Listen, it was nice having you guys in our league, sharing about your owners, though, isn't it? Trying to come bloody everything. Who knows how this has happened, but it has happened somehow. So the issue going forwards is this. ESL, being an EPL as a result, being so deeply involved with WESA, makes WESA essentially the EU PEA. Now, the bizarre part about that is you've got a WESA, an EU PEA, that wants to run an NA league rather than NA PEA or alongside it. And yet the players of NA PEA are somehow thinking, yeah, the EU PEA is doing a greater job, even though we wouldn't share any of that. That's what a good job the guys from WESA have done in getting to these players. And people keep ignoring that essentially that's the divide. It always was EU versus NA. It wasn't ever that WESA was somehow an NA one as well. People are going to say, yeah, but ESEA leagues run this long. By the way, I notice when people say how long ESEA's leagues run, they haven't looked it up. ESEA league has not run for 10 years. That's simply not the case. It's run, I think the first one started at the beginning of, I'm going to say 2009. I think it was the beginning of 2009 or the end of 2008. The first season was the one before Evil Geniuses was involved, and that so we're talking like 7 years at this point in time. Before that, they didn't have a big league in that same sense. They didn't have ESEA invite. But ESEA has obviously been around as a community figure, sure. But that's really not relevant to the whole EPL system. Now it's ESL, now it's WESA, now it's MTG. This is a different kettle of fish than when it was ESL. So it is very much a European organisation. It's got NA people within it, maybe running the operations over there, but it is much more a European thing. And when ESL themselves are so involved with WESA, and their number one person they have to answer to beyond MTG obviously is the WESA teams, and WESA as an org and PEA teams aren't involved in that. It's not actually that big a surprise that PEA teams would feel like, hey, we're not actually directly being catered to by these people, and we should set up our own thing if we can have our own WESA. And you know what? We'll run our WESA. We won't have them run it like they do. Teams in theory have much less of an involvement in WESA than teams in PEA do, because teams in PEA basically sort of own the league and are directly involved in it. They don't have a say and all that sort of guff. And obviously in WESA, they just got paid money and then they were a part of it. Whereas in this one, you're just part of it because you're going to get all the money and you're going to control the whole scene. So I said when WESA was formed, if you remember, that this was an issue. Like I made the point that yes, ESL's trying to go for exclusivity, and WESA is a lot of fuckery around what it says it is and the way it's trying to publicly present itself into the mainstream world and what it actually is, and how it's obviously a controlling set of interests of ESL, and then they're trying to get some teams banded together and use that as a power push so that people will look at them and see them as the FIFA of esports. And in the future, when the big broadcasting deals come in, they'll be the ones to negotiate it, and they'll rev share some of it down to the teams, and that's how it's going to be made. That is the future. Like the future is that revenue sharing the broadcast rights are going to be the biggest issue. It's not just going to be about putting on a cool tournament with sponsors, you winning some of it and going, haha, I'm a pro gamer. Like it's going to be all about the billions and who gets the billions and how's that divided up. That's why right now is where the battleground is, where people stake out their territory so that when the billions come, if indeed they do, absolutely not a given, then you'll be in position to get your share. It's not, you don't wait until have the battle then when you find, oh, it's all sewn up. People already own all that. I get none of these shares. Oh, I battled and I got extra prize money. I got to compete in a league I want to compete in, but it turns out billions came along later. I was getting my cut of a million or two. Now billions have come along and me and my team and my players could have been involved, and we're not. It's too late for that. No, that's why the battle's going on right now. That's why these years, last year, this year, the next few years, are the formative years deciding who controls esports in that particular sense. So here's something I want to ask about. When people make out like it was a ridiculous suggestion that PEA take over instead of WESA, and that PEA could kick out EPL and make them vacate, think about this. Where is the revenue sharing in EPL? Now, we've heard some vague thing about how it's starting and it's going to be involved somehow. We know for WESA teams that they're in place if the rights come along, but that's WESA. The PEA teams have nothing to do with WESA. And we don't even know how revenue sharing actually works within WESA necessarily. Where are the players' say and votes within EPL? Oh, they don't have any. There's WESA again, and even in WESA, it's already balanced, but in a much more rigged manner. I'd say rigged instead of balanced, because again, the players and the teams can easily be outvoted by the other aspects of the board and WESA, etc. That can absolutely happen, and they ultimately don't have a say beyond what WESA wants to do. They can tell them what they want to do, but there's a big difference in that sense, isn't there? There's always a big difference between being able to say something and then have someone else make the decision, and have a say as in actually make a decision which counts towards something. Vote, or directly be the one who decides a vote, or as a group can a majority decide a vote. There's a massive difference there, and that's why whenever people say like authoritative voice and say, I want to know what that actually means. Does it mean decision making? If it doesn't, then it's just flowery words for saying I'll listen to you and then do whatever the fuck I wanted. Maybe influenced by what you do, but that's at the good grace of me and how magnanimous I am as an owner, or as the head of one of these conglomerates, these associations, these basically like organizer or team union type scenarios. You've also got to consider that not only is there's not player say in EPL, less in fact than PEA, but the voting's also not only rigged against teams, but then there's the whole Esports fuckery involved with team ownership where multiple teams in some way are owned or partially owned or connected with this one organization, and then you're part of some sort of a team union, which is really just ESL's way of getting you on board to maybe get share their broadcasting rights one day. And now what? You're going to vote when 3 of the teams in theory could all be voting one way and against you and blocking you, and then they're involved somehow with people above that who might be able to make deals with ESL, and then suddenly it's ESL and some of the teams versus some of the other teams. This is mad fuckery potential here. Don't know why people are presenting WESA as some sort of savior. This is madness. Then you've got to add in, where's EPL and WESA with health insurance, financial assistance? These aren't small things. That's pretty significant if you want to make a career going forwards as a pro. People have ignored that completely because they're so against the notion of PEA. So here's the thing. This whole issue to me was a power play by EPL, by ESL, by WESA. The irony of it, though, and this is the key aspect to understand about why it was clever, and I don't think ESL could have known this themselves, is that it turns out ESL has communicated with PEA's own players better or more effectively than the PEA owners themselves did. So ESL, WESA, EPL was able to get their message across better, more effectively, and with more urgency so that it was believed, understood, and kind of acknowledged as having some basis by the players of PEA teams better than the PEA owners themselves were. I mean, this is the real question, okay? This is the crux of the fuck-up that's happened with PEA here. How have the PEA owners not managed to make their own players understand that they will get more money in this league, that they will get a better revenue share, that they will have a better chance for long-term success as esports grows? How have they not been able to sell their own players on that? If you can't sell your own players on that notion and make them understand it, that doesn't really bode well for the future of your league, does it? And other people in the industry understanding. ESL should have been the easiest entity to paint as a villain here and sell an idea against in the history of esports. I mean, you could just bring up all the issues they have at events, the tables, not listen to players, and then how they changed their mind, a bunch of things. You could bring up the fact that you have a lack of say in how it's run, and you could say, hey, you know what, we're not even in WESA, so all those WESA teams are getting preferential treatment over us. And then you could say, this will cause us issues down the line. And you know what? In the future, when the broadcasting rights come, how do we get any of it? How do we get a share of it? Then you could throw in all the shady ES4 shit I just pointed out before and say, you know what? And there's these teams going on, this Eastern European involvement, and how are we going to have a say in it? And are they going to be aligned against us and deciding what's going on and what the fuck is going on with that money? You could throw in all this stuff. They haven't even been able to successfully do that. Now, what was weird about this whole scenario to me, the biggest, most weird thing, was the public reaction. Like, I get it that people love players. And if they love a player and they love his personality, they want to be on his side. Now, I don't really get it as much as I don't do that personally. Like, I can like someone, think they're an awesome player, really cool guy, but then they say a bunch of bullshit. I go, well, that's nonsense, mate. I like you, but that's absolute shite. But what's bizarre to me is that people just are wholly on board with the players. As in, they're not just on board, they don't even seem to understand. The issue was actually the players' right to choose. It wasn't even that they would choose EPL. They might, in the end, then choose PEA. It's that the players felt as though they didn't have a choice to choose EPL rather, because it had been taken away, because PEA had negotiated with WESA, the negotiation failed, WESA's told the players, oh, you're going to get pulled out of the league, there's no chance anymore, the guys are... And then they thought, hey, we didn't even get a say, what we wanted to vote, we wanted to say. That's the big issue. Instead, people are like, no, EPL is a good thing, EPL's better than PEA. You know, WESA's better than PEA in some sense. Like, this PEA is all fucked up, man. What are they trying to do? Control the scene, have monopoly? Like, that's the most bizarre aspect, that people went all in on that, because that assumption holds very little basis whatsoever based on anything anyone said. Now, I will say, the players did a very good job painting themselves as these totally innocent victims of org abuse, and, oh, my boss is just, like, forcing me to do this way. What about player rights, man? Hashtag player rights. But there are so many unchecked assumptions in what people have been saying that need a lot more unpacking. And actually, those players would be better suited by doing an interview and answering some of these hard questions, rather than just rabble-rousing, getting people on their side. I understand doing their own power play, trying to get PEA to have to do something and to get back into negotiation with EPL and to give the players more say. I understand that aspect of using the players, the public against them. But there's so many assumptions they don't explain. If their number one objective here was to explain to the public what's going on, they did a very poor job of that. Because think about this. They asserted the players' right to choose where they compete. Now, admittedly, that was propped up by, in my opinion, some quite ill-thought-out PR from PEA themselves when they launched the league, but they just asserted this right. And they just continually reasserted it without ever explaining why would they have a right to that? Why would they be entitled to a right to decide where they compete? This is something I'll talk about in the video that's PEA versus the players. Why would that be an assumption that would follow? Why would it be an assumption that you should be given that right? And where's the proof that you were ever? Just because they said, oh, we'll give you a say in it. Well, who said you ever had that? And why would you then come on with, what? I don't have a say. Well, then you're the one behind the game, mate. I could have told you, go watch my fucking video. Where were you ever in control? You weren't. It was all just a bunch of words to make you sound like you were, because it's easier to sell a player-owned league than a team-org-owned league. Even though, in my opinion, team-org-owned league still sounds better than ESL-owned league, right? In some sense. I mean, obviously it depends who you are. For ESL, it sounds fucking terrible. So, I think, quite frankly, ESL is the best one to run ESL type league. So, yeah, you got to understand the way that thing works. You then got to consider the assumption, again, unchecked or unquantified or unjustified, which is that oversaturation is something real. It's not just a byproduct of the heyday of CS and how big it is, etc. That people will watch more if there are fewer tournaments, and that somehow having more tournaments kills off the viewer base. Another unchecked assumption, just taken for granted as if it was the case, with no backing, no facts, no metrics, not even really good argumentation put in favour of it, and very rarely even defined in that way. Then, even though that's the implication of what people say about oversaturation and having fewer tournaments, then you've got to say, look at the assumption that people will watch the same teams play over and over again in smaller, fewer leagues than they currently watch the same teams plus more teams, because you've got more tournaments, more opportunities to compete, more chances to qualify, more mixture of teams. They'll watch those same teams play over and over again, so it'll become the same battles over and over again, more so than they'd watch more teams, more variety in the current tournaments that we have. Despite the fact, simultaneously, fans always tell us that they want novelty in terms of new teams appearing and new teams winning. They get bored, they say, of the same team winning, and they say they get bored of seeing the same teams play over and over again. Yet that's all they want to see in this oversaturation solution world of just these few leagues. These are all unchecked assumptions. That's why I'm not in favour, personally, of like oversaturation restrictions or removing leagues or blocking leagues out. I'm not in favour of that in general myself. But the assumptions here are unchecked even by the players in this particular sense. Then there's people who say it doesn't matter because Valve could just come along at any minute and do all this stuff. Valve is a long time gone if they ever planned on having any say in any of this sort of shit. They've just sat back and they've let it all happen. Now, would Valve getting involved and saying who can have a league and how it's going to run, would that be a good thing? I mean, maybe we have no basis to say it would be at the moment, though. I would go ahead and guess it wouldn't be a good thing. That's based on Valve's own relationship with the community, how it treats the community, how much it seems to value the esports side of the community, its own understanding of the league. I mean, look at the way they run the majors. They still have randomizers in. They still force maps on us. They don't really seem to be aligned with a lot of the things in the community. Then you've got to consider, would it be a good thing based on past developer involvement from other games? Well, no, those are terrible in my opinion. I thought Blizzard did a terrible job with WCS and the way they restricted tournaments there and the way they region locked and all these sorts of things and how they structured it and whether or not they listened to the community and then how they responded to the community and treated them. Then you've got to consider Riot Games' involvement with LCS, in my opinion, killed off a lot of potential of LCS, ruined a lot of the competition and massively altered the careers of some fantastic players who never got a proper tournament circuit to compete within and then had all these mad restrictions on them with poaching that could have reduced their their career earnings in terms of prize money and league opportunity and salary opportunities, etc. for different teams. I think these were abominations of esports, what we're done here. So seeing developer direct involvement and deciding these things, I don't think makes it any better. Because think about it. Here's the problem. The players want the right to choose, right? They think when the owners have the right of their teams have the right to choose, the owners just value their own opinions and what they were going to benefit from, right? But what happens when the orgs do it? Well, the orgs tend to benefit themselves, right? And they tend to switch it to themselves. We're going to be the priority here. Sure, teams a little bit because we need teams involved, and then players follow what the teams do. So we get the teams on board, like WESA, and we have our own league with enough prize money, and then we've got it all sorted, and we'll get the majority of the profit. Then you go above that, there's the dev. Well, now the dev wants all his profit, like Riot from the MLBAM deal. And Riot wants to be the one that controls, well, you're just a team, and you need to compete in my league, etc. So the problem is, as you go up the chain of ladder, and obviously Riot made themselves the tournament organisers, so they took that spot as well. It just goes to the control structure that the priority is always at the top with them. And then they give a little bit to the person below because people below them in the hierarchy can be controlled by them in some sense. So we understand that there needs to be an even distribution of power and all the rest of it within this total thing. But it's not as simple as making out like just giving all the power to the person at the bottom of the hierarchy, the bottom of the pyramid makes the most sense. Likewise, it doesn't make the most sense to just give it to someone at the top either. We want a distribution so that in theory, people whose specialty at these levels can account for themselves and make sure they get a fair deal. And then there's a fair deal with the person above. And overall, since it's wide open, there's not just going to be abuse where there's only a bit of money comes in and it stays at the top. We're going to have a full trickle down, but we're going to have lots of options and lots of variety and lots of movement within, mobility within the different levels of the hierarchy. That's supposedly what you should want more so, as far as I can tell. That's not what's being presented here, and that's not what this battle was. This battle was PEA versus WESA. And those are two similar entities on different sides of the globe competing for the same territory at the moment. And then the players got in the middle of it as the mechanism, as a chip, a bargaining chip, as a tool to try and get PEA back to the bargaining table to strike a deal more favourable to WESA than they currently have at the moment, where PEA thought they had all the best moves. They thought they could force the guys from WESA to have to agree to them because they wouldn't have the teams otherwise, and they could make it that way, so it would be more skewed towards them overall. So did people... here's the question I would ask at the end. What did people actually want as a solution to oversaturation? When you cried about oversaturation and said it exists and made all these unchecked assumptions that, it's because too many teams and too many tournaments where the teams play constantly and too much online CS and LANs that are too small, not just the big ones. When you said all of that, presumably you just wanted Valve to come in and arbitrarily say, we're going to have this league, this league, this league, this league, there's 10 leagues, no more leagues, everyone else out. And you thought that would be good. You thought they should decide who can run a league. I mean, why would the market not ever be allowed to decide it? Why would someone like PEA come along with more money and better rev sharing opportunities and better opportunities for their players? Why would they not be allowed to have a say in as much as they could outcompete something like ESL if it existed? Why is that not a better thing? I don't make answers to any of these assumptions, but when I ask the questions, everyone else seems to have their mind made up already and to know it all, but they're not able to then explain it. PEA did a bad job of explaining to their players. WESA at the moment somehow has just benefited from the fact that, like, what's the best thing about WESA at the moment? They're not PEA. Wicked, yeah, but WESA has a lot of problems that are actually worse than PEA's problems. Yeah, but what's their name? WESA. So not PEA? No, not PEA. I prefer that then. PEA's evil. Like, the whole scenario just doesn't make any sense. So we'll go into it more. This one wasn't a lot of drama. It wasn't so spicy, this one. The ones with the players are going to have a lot more... It's going to go a lot more in depth on those ones.